I have never been one for the Metroidvania genre. I've just never enjoyed the genre that much, and each time I try to, I can't seem to enjoy it. There are many Metroidvania in the world that people are recommended to me, but each time I just don't get it. Maybe it is the fact that backtracking is one of my most hated things in a video game, and Metroidvania consists of that a lot. I understand why others love this genre. There is something satisfying about discovering something you can't quite utilize yet, exploring and finding an ability/item for that purpose, and then thinking to yourself, oh, I can do this now. It is definitely a fun game loop for many, and I always wanted to enjoy it too. A popular source of Metroidvania would be the indie game community. Seriously, there are so many indie game Metroidvanias, it isn't funny. I tried games like Monster Sanctuary, Cave Story, Salt and Sanctuary, Ori and the Blind Forest. I enjoyed Salt and Sanctuary, although I never beat it, and I enjoyed Ori so much that I bought the sequel. But even then, I still didn't like this genre of game that much. There was one option left for me to get into this genre of video games, and that was Hollow Knight. I heard huge things about this game, many people claiming it to be the best indie game, best Metroidvania, and one of the best games ever. I kept my eye on it for a bit and finally found it on the Nintendo Switch, and I got it. I thought to myself, finally, this game is mine, and I put it into my Switch, had no clue what I was doing, loved the art and the music, played up until Deep Nest, and yeah, I quit. I just wasn't enjoying this game for whatever reason when I picked it up. I was lost, confused, and absolutely horrendous, and I think I probably just quit because I was bad and stupid. I let this rot on my pile of Switch games. I kept thinking to myself, I really need to play Hollow Knight at some point, which would result in me popping in the game for about 30 minutes, and then I would get bored. Eventually, about 2 years later, I finally tasked myself to finish this game for good, so here are my thoughts on Hollow Knight and how it made me like Metroidvania. Sort of. Hollow Knight has a very sad beginning, featuring your little guy walking alone towards Dirtmouth, the main hub of the game. This game doesn't really explain much. It's similar to Dark Souls in the aspect of if you want to understand its lore, you're going to have to read a lot of descriptions and decipher text. I'm not sure what the lore is at all, so don't get mad at me, but from what I understand, our little guy is the product of the Abyss, and we have to kill the Hollow Knight to become the Hollow Knight to, help Hollow Nest, I think. I'm not sure at all, and I won't go into it because I don't want to make people angry. I suppose I'll start with how this game looks. This game looks beautiful. I mean, indie games have this reputation of giving a game a unique art style to stick out, and Hollow Knight by no means is any different, but it's very nice looking, unique, and it's a well done art style. Everything looks clean, and I can't really go into more detail than that. Everything just looks great, everything looks smooth, everything looks clean. That's really all I can ask for in a game. This is demonstrated as early as Dirtmouth, and I'll explain what Dirtmouth is here so I don't have to later. Dirtmouth acts as your hub in the game. As you explore the world of Hollow Nest, you find a variety of NPCs which you can interact with. Some of these NPCs move into Dirtmouth and open up shops for you to buy a variety of things. You meet this cartographer named Cornifer, and after you meet him, he tells you about his wife's shop up in Dirtmouth. There's also this warrior NPC named Zote, who you find throughout the game, and he will show up there every now and then. Come to think of it, all of the side characters are very nice. They don't typically do much, but they're charming and help give this world a lot more life. Zote is a former warrior who still thinks he is in his prime, and you will find yourself saving him multiple times in the game. Each interaction with him revolves around you saving him, and each time you do, he claims how he didn't need your help, and his nail, which is basically a sword, the Life Ender, can strike down any opponent, even you, with ease. If you explore enough, you find the Colosseum, and after you go through waves of enemies, he's the final opponent, and he can't even damage you. You just knock him around, and eventually he loses. If you head back to Dirtmouth, you will find him talking to another NPC, Gerdo, which is this bug-sorted lady, which you have to find and save in the game. There's also this detail with Zote where you can fight him in his true form, him in his prime, if you will. If you go into one of the houses in Dirtmouth, you will find a basement. If you fall down the basement, you'll find this odd scene of mini Zotes fanning Gerda, and the true form of Zote shows up. It's an optional, but very cool fight. They didn't need to make this inclusion, but the fact they did shows how much developers, Team Cherry, really care about this game. Everything is expertly crafted, whether it's the world you walk on or the oddballs you interact with. The map of this game is crafted with so much care, and it is fun to explore and discover the many secrets this game hides. Greenpath is a lovely area with serene music, and Greenpath itself is where you meet Hornet. Hornet is basically what I would describe as your rival character in this game. Basically, anytime you see Hornet, you are going in the right direction. Her whole purpose is to guide you and test if you are really worthy for being the Hollow Knight and discovering your roots in this game. I think she's a fun character, and I know a ton of people like her for better or for worse. But my personal favorite would have to be Quarrel, the Explorer. He's an NPC you find scattered throughout your journey in Hollow Nest, and he seemingly has the same intentions as you. You interact more and more towards the end of the game, and he actually helps you in a boss fight. You fight against this giant electric jellyfish thing, and you can't damage it at all until Quirrell randomly shows up and removes its defenses. I love this. It was such a cool detail. Now, once again, didn't need to be there, but they planned a boss around this character. It's just awesome, and I know there's a lot of lore to it since he owns one of the Dreamer's masks. Since I mentioned bosses, why don't I talk about them briefly? The bosses in this game are really fun. I didn't fight many of them, unfortunately, but the ones that I did fight were very high quality and good fun. There are a plethora of bosses in this game, DLC included of course, and I barely scratched the surface of what this game has to offer. There is so much content in this game. I played about 14 hours and I felt like I explored a ton. I mean, I really felt like I found a lot of what this world had to offer. At the end of the game, it shows your completion. I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe I got, 65, maybe close to 70 of the game. 57% of it, and it kind of hurt looking at that. So there is a ton of stuff to do in this game, a lot of optional content and post-game content, so you'll probably find yourself to be very busy if you get into this game a lot. There are collectibles such as mask shards and soul vessels. Mask shards increase how many times you can get hit. Soul vessels are these tiny capsules that give you soul. While on the topic of soul, allow me to get into Hollow Knight's combat. Hollow Knight has a very simplistic but fun combat style. You have a basic swing that can go left, right, up, down, but the down swing is unique for you can hit an enemy with that swing and you bounce off of said enemy. This means you can chain a ton of attacks with just one move, and even use the move in some platforming challenges. There are also abilities in the world which you unlock, like healing, which is granted to you at the start, a blast of soul, howling wraiths, an upward AoE, and a desolate dive, which is an AoE ground pound. All of these require soul, which is basically just your ability meter. The more soul you have, the more healing you can use, or the more abilities you can use. It's quite simple. There's also the charm mechanic. Charms allow you to get small or big bonuses that can help in a variety of situations. Most of them are pretty simplistic, such as healing faster, doing more damage, acquiring more soul, improving the reach of your weapon, abilities costing less soul to use, the works. There are some like Shell, which is a charm that allows you to heal without taking damage if you get hit, but this shell can take a limited amount of damage. There's Grub Song, which grubs are these little worm guys that you can save throughout the game, and when you save them, you can visit the Grub Elder, which will give you rewards, primarily Geo, this game's form of currency. The charm grants you a bit of soul when you take damage, and as someone who is dog shit at this game, I found this charm particularly useful, especially since it only took up one notch. See, each charm takes up a different number of notches. Notches are what's required to equip a charm. Rarer and more useful charms tend to be around 2 to 3 range of charm notch requirement. I didn't mess around with the charms too much. I did get around 20, but I never really messed around with the mechanic that much. I'm sure if you have an extensive knowledge of them, they can be very game-changing, and in my case, some of the charms I used were very useful. Most charms can be found throughout secrets in the world, but you can also buy charms from a variety of shopkeepers around Hollow Nest. There are other NPCs, such as the Nailsmith. He upgrades your weapon damage. There are also Nail Masters, which are former warriors who teach you different moves you can use with your nail, such as a spin attack, a charge to slash, and allowing you to attack immediately after a dash. These abilities aren't very useful, at least in my experience. You're almost always better off to just attack normally rather than charging up a spin attack or a great slash. Your movement is also restricted when using these, so I argue that they're not that useful. They require very specific moments of gameplay to get any use out of them. They're nowhere close to being utilized to their fullest potential, but it's nice having them there anyway, even if there isn't much use to them. I think something about Hollow Knight that it does exceptionally well is making everything you find have a valid use. Nothing feels truly useless aside from the aforementioned nail abilities. Everything helps out in some shape or form depending on your situation in the game. Like I said previously, there's a lot to find, so don't get too bummed if you miss out a couple things on your first playthrough. That being said, how about we talk about the zones that you explore? While I did enjoy the zones for the most part, I don't know, man. I wish there was more to them. Not like I wish there was more content in these zones. I just wish the zones had more variety in terms of exploration and platforming provided. This game has some fun movement and very fluid mechanics, but the zones, I don't know, just got a bit boring after a while. A lot of the zones feel samey, the same general progression of go through this hallway, find something you can't get to yet, go through another hallway, find something, then return to that one point. Again, this is just a problem I share with the Metroidvanias in general. I generally feel like every Metroidvania is designed the same and gets boring after a while. I loved Ori and the Blind Forest, but at certain points I was getting very bored because of its Metroidvania world. But the thing with Ori and the Blind Forest is it had very fun and sometimes even challenging platforming. For Hollow Knight, I experienced this feeling around the end of City of Tears. Everything just felt like walk through a linear hallway with enemies, wall jump here, do the same thing everywhere else. I don't think the level design is that interesting. And again, I don't think this is a strictly a Hollow Knight problem, but my own issue with Metroidvania games and indie games in general. A lot of indie games just feel the same, whether it's art style, genre, gameplay, what have you. They all kind of blur in my head. In my honest opinion, I think indie games are nearing the future of AAA titles. Games that feel copy and paste, which in my opinion, they already feel that way, whether it's a niche Earthbound-inspired RPG about depression or a platformer about the same thing. I think indie games are fun, but mostly very few and far between. Some of them are amazing. Take Celeste, for example, a very fun platformer with a nice message about stress and anxiety and fighting your own self. Hollow Knight is fun. It's a great game, I agree, but I think it could have been better if it was in a similar vein as Celeste or even Ori. A platformer with a variety of movement mechanics and action combat for Hollow Knight sounds perfect, in my opinion. Like a game like Celeste, or a game like Ori and the Blind Forest, which you're just going to have to look into yourself. I'm not going into those games yet. But as it stands, the game is still good. That is my general verdict for the game. It's good. Nothing more, nothing less. Now this may change once I bring myself to beat the DLC at some point, and if it does, I will undoubtedly make a video about it, but currently, my opinion on the game is around an 8 out of 10. I liked it, absolutely, but certain parts of the game felt like a drag. It could be with the reception this game has gotten over the last few years. As I mentioned in the beginning, I heard so many people claim that this is one of the best games ever, especially in the indie game genre. But I don't know, man. I just don't see it. I don't get it. I understand why some people might consider this as one of the best games ever, but I just don't share that opinion. To me, it feels like every other indie game platformer that I have played. Does that mean the game is bad? No, absolutely not. Does it mean the game is not unique in its own right? No, this game is absolutely unique in terms of its setting, design, music, and story. But gameplay-wise, the exact same as any other indie platformer I've played, like I said. And I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm saying this game is bad, because Hollow Knight fans are insane and they flip shit anytime anyone says something about their precious game that is anything but amazing. And I'm saying that I don't think the game is amazing. I think it's good. I think it's nice. I think it's fun. But I don't think it's as amazing as everyone says it is. The game was fun, beginning to end. It had lovely interactions and world building, fun boss fights, sweet music. But by the halfway point, I was just wishing that it was over. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. I was just wishing that this game would end. The level design, to me, uninteresting. How the levels looked, the setting of the levels, awesome. But going through the levels themselves, Green Path didn't feel any different from Unforgotten Crossroads. Fog Canyon, or whatever it's called, didn't feel any different from Green Path. Deep Nest didn't feel any different from Green Path or Forgotten Crossroads. Everything just kind of felt the same, which made me significantly enjoy the game less, which is why I give it an 8 out of 10. But I finally gave this game a chance, and I feel some people are going to be pissed at me for my take. I understand, but I don't think this game sucks. I don't think Hollow Knight is some low-effort game with barely any content to sink your teeth into. For $15, yeah, this game has a ton of content and it's worth it. I recognize the immense amount of passion this game has, and it's super admirable. It's just not my kind of game. And this is just my opinion. You can disagree with me all you want. Say I suck at the game or I barely experienced it. I don't care. Just keep it civil. I know how weird Hollow Knight fans can be, especially when it comes to Silk Song. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching. Do the basic YouTube stuff. See ya.